Hello, my name is Søren. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at uCommerce, and I'm here to tell you about the new API of uCommerce coming up soon. The project is called Project Bolt, and the goal of the API is to introduce a new, simpler, safe by default API for uCommerce, which will make your job much easier when you're creating e-commerce solutions. We have a few design guidelines in place to help you out, safe by default. So we wanted to see if we can guide you in the proper direction when you're doing a project with uCommerce to make sure you land in the pit of success as opposed to the pit of failure. What that means is basically the API will force you to work in a paged way. So if you're dealing with lots of data in the platform, you will have to deal with it explicitly instead of implicitly today. The other thing is that we are building all this on search-driven technology, which means that the API will be powered by search engines instead of a SQL database. What that means is it will be fast, very fast, and it will be provider-based, so you can use your search engine of choice. Out of the box, we're shipping Lucene as a search provider for simple use cases that are non-scalable across servers. And we're also introducing a second search provider based on Elasticsearch to make sure that you have a scalable approach to the new API across multiple servers. We're using these two search engines because they are, the first one is simple. Lucene is very simple to deploy. Elasticsearch is by far the most commonly used search engine among our providers, so that's why we're using those two. Now, because we're introducing a completely new API, it also means that you need to deal with transitioning your solutions from the old API to the new. The old API will be removed from uCommerce in its entirety. The reason for this is feedback from our partners have told us that there are too many different ways of actually building a solution on top of uCommerce. So we wanted to make sure that you only have one way to do it. This will mean that you don't have to think about whether you're doing it in the right way, because there's only one way. This is the new API. So Bolt will be awesome. It will be amazing. You're going to love it, I'm pretty sure. However, you also need to think about how to transition from the old to the new. And so let me just show you what we're thinking there. Because there is, the two APIs will be similar, but they will be new signatures. They will be different to work with, even though the similarity is in place. So to start out a project today and then be able to move over to the new API in the simplest way possible, you need to have a few things in mind to do it. So there are basically two ways of building a solution today, either in a pure MVC approach in .NET or using Web API and a single page application architecture, an SPA. So let's start with the SPA because that's probably the most common approach. So what we have there is basically we have the web application running in the client inside the browser, and this application is served by a REST endpoint. So you will create that REST endpoint. That's no different today or tomorrow. And the app will speak to that endpoint, right? So it will request information from the REST endpoint presented in the browser up here. And that's all well and good. Now, today, you're probably doing this already. If not, what you want to do is you want to introduce a service layer between the REST API and uCommerce itself. So what the service layer is really there for is to translate between the uCommerce API models that you get returned, so product catalog, group, category, and so forth, into your own view models, which in turn will be passed up through the layers into the application. To make sure that the transition is as easy as possible for you, what you basically do is you call uCommerce, let's call it version current, right? The what version we have right now. So that's what you would be doing today using the existing API of uCommerce. So you would call that, and you would get an entity back for the service layer, like that. And that entity will of course be produced by the old API, which means that you would translate that into a data transfer object that would be passed up through your layers. Which means that after the point of the service layer, uCommerce would be transparent. The solution would not really know that uCommerce is there at all, because we're just using the DTOs all the way up into our web pages. What that means then is The key is mapping the entities to your DTOs. So once uCommerce 9 comes out and introduces Bolt into your solutions, the current API goes away and is replaced by a new API, right? By Bolt. So the key there is that the change only occurs at this level. Nothing up here changes, which means that the transition is simpler to deal with. So the service layer will be redirected to Bolt, call the new APIs, which still produce products and categories and things like that. And the only thing that changes is the mapping from the entities produced by the new API into your DTOs. So the rest of the application is unaffected by this change. That's the general idea. So if you're working with a single page application, this is roughly what it would look like. Just add in this layer, the service layer, into your architectures from the get-go, so only DTOs are passed up through the layers. Doing an MVC application is almost the same. Well, actually exactly the same. The only difference is there is no REST layer when you're doing just MVC, right? So you'd have your controllers here instead, and you would still have this service layer that we just discussed. Everything else would be the same. The entities would need to be translated into view models or DTOs, and all the application would rely on those models. And that's basically it. So by no means will it be simple to do this. Well, it will be simple, but it won't be easy. There will be some time required to transition your application from the existing version of uCommerce to the new. However, you won't have to do a million changes to your solutions. It will be, you know, a job that is fairly straightforward to deal with. Okay, so what Bolt is basically, you know, it's for future projects and for your current projects. It's going to speed up your solutions. It's going to make it simpler to implement an e-commerce solution using uCommerce on any CMS we support. It's going to be customizable as well. So if you need to add your own information into the API, that will be possible. You can tailor the existing APIs to your needs. So the DTOs that will be produced by Bolt are actually configurable, so you can have your own DTOs produced there. So the whole mapping layer here can actually go away using the new APIs. It's going to be pretty cool. And you will be able to switch search providers of the Bolt API on the go. So if you start out your solutions using Lucene, and you later figure out that you need scaling capabilities within the API, you can replace the Lucene provider with the Elasticsearch provider or a third search provider if you prefer some other search engine to achieve those scalability. And you can also build your own provider, of course, in case you have another favorite search engine that you want to use. So that's Bolt. I am convinced you're going to love it. We're really looking forward to getting this into your hands. It's going to be amazing. Thank you.